I only want to add 3 points to what the Secretary has already laid out. First, I think it's noteworthy that the working group found strong leadership to be the single most important factor in implementing any repeal. That may sound fairly obvious, but it is a key, critical point. We all have our opinions, and those opinions matter. This is without question a complex social and cultural issue. But at the end of the day, whatever the decision of our elected leaders may be, we in uniform have an obligation to follow orders. When those orders involve significant change, such as this would, we need to find ways to lead the way forward. Our troops and their families expect that from us, and I think the American people do as well. Second, we've heard loud and clear that our troops also expect us to maintain high standards of conduct and professionalism, both as we move forward in this debate and should repeal occur. We treat people with dignity and respect in the armed forces, or we don't last long. No special cases, no special treatment. We're going to continue to comport ourselves with honor and hold ourselves accountable across the board to impeccably high standards, repeal or no repeal. Finally, the report shows that however low the overall risk of repeal may be with respect to readiness, cohesion, and retention, it is not without its challenges. We can best address those challenges by having it within our power and our prerogative to manage the implementation process ourselves. Should repeal occur, I share the Secretary's desire that it come about through legislation, through the same process with which the law was enacted, rather than precipitously through the courts. I further hope that such debate in the Congress will be as fully informed by the good work done in this report as my advice to the Secretary and to the President is. Thank you.
Secretary Gates, you said it would be unwise to proceed with repeal until there's more groundwork. How long do you envision that process lasting? And is this a concern and a recommendation that is shared by the White House as far as once Congress acts, there still being a period in which the policy is in place? Admiral Mullen, do you also share that recommendation?
Well, first of all, just to be clear, what we're talking about is that should the Congress vote to repeal the law, what we are asking for is the time subsequent to that to prepare adequately before the change is implemented in the force. How long that would take, frankly, I don't know. There is the report, as you will see in the implementation plan, lays out an ambitious agenda of things that need to be done, including not only leadership training, but training of a military force of over 2 million people. I would say this. I think we all would expect that if this law is implemented, the President would be if repeal is passed, the President would be watching very closely to ensure that we don't dawdle or try to slow roll this. So I think his expectation would be that we would prepare as quickly as we properly and comprehensively could, and then we would be in a position to move toward the certification. But how long that would take, I think, I don't know.
There is a level of risk here as is laid out in the report, and I would hope you spend as much time on the implementation plan as the report, because the implementation plan, certainly from all the military leadership, is strongly endorsed should this law change. And it is in that implementation plan that the risk levels are mitigated, and principally mitigated through leadership. Certainly the training, the guidance, but the engagement of the leadership, and having enough time to do that is critically important as we would look at implementation. That's what really mitigates any risk that's out there.
You said the chiefs are less sanguine than the working group. What specifically have they told you about their concerns, and why, in time of war, accept any increase in the level of risk?
Well, the chiefs will speak for themselves on Friday, and the chairman has spent much more time with them than I have on this. I think it's fair to say that their concerns revolve around stress on a force after nearly 10 years of war, and I think they are concerned about the higher levels of negative response from the ground combat units and the special operations units that I talked about in my remarks. I think that I would just like to go back and underscore the chairman's point, and that is the level of risk is tied intimately to the quality of preparation. And to do this, so I guess I would put it this way: if a court ordered us to do this tomorrow, I believe the risk to the force would be high if we had no time to prepare. If we have plenty of time to prepare the force, to prepare the leadership, I think the more effectively we do that preparation, the lower the risk. But, Chairman?
I've engaged actually many times with the chiefs over the last many months, and so we've had very, very extensive discussions about this. And from the standpoint of a change in the law, I mean, my perspective is, as what I would call certainly was my personal opinion, is now my professional view, that this is a policy change that we can make, and we can do it in a relatively low risk fashion, given the time and given the ability to mitigate whatever risk is out there through strong leadership. In fact, part of this is the fact that we have been at war for so long. We have, one of the discussions about this is affecting combat effectiveness or combat readiness. I've never been associated with a better military than we are right now, and better military leaders. And I have tremendous confidence that should this change, that they'll be able to implement it very specifically.
What about
listening to Joint Chiefs of Staff Admiral Mike Mullen and Defense Secretary Robert Gates take a few questions on this much anticipated report on Don't Ask, Don't Tell from the Pentagon. With me in studio is the host of the Rachel Maddow Show, Rachel Maddow. We also have a couple of other guests lined up, but I've got to start off, of course, with you, Rachel. We'd heard leaks that it would be about 70% in the survey that said they would anticipate no change or mixed reviews as far as if Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. And now we've got the hard facts in a report. What happens next?
What happens next is that all eyes are on the Republicans, really. A lot of the objections voiced by members of the Congress who are Republicans, who are not known for strongly anti-gay views, not known as being real crusaders on this as a social issue, have been hinging on this report. Now this report is unequivocal. The risk of repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell to overall military effectiveness is low. We heard Admiral Mullen just there saying it used to be my personal opinion that we ought to get rid of this. It is now my professional opinion that we ought to get rid of this. You heard Secretary Gates making an incredibly, I thought, nimble argument and a strong argument that the risk here to the armed services is them not doing this on their own terms, of being forced to do it on the terms imposed by a court, saying that it is of high risk if you don't take care of this legislatively. It is of low risk if we do this on our own terms, and then all those eyes turn to implementation plans. So
the concern is, of course, the federal courts getting involved and lawmakers not acting before the end of the year in this lame duck session of Congress. We can bring up, if in a sense the ball is in the court of some of the House Republicans already. Congressman Joe Wilson, the ranking member on the House Armed Services Subcommittee, says using the last days of a lame duck Congress is to hastily repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell would be highly irresponsible. Today's Pentagon report must be thoroughly examined by the committees of jurisdiction to determine the potential impacts on the military recruitment. So even having the report and having these military leaders say in definitive words what they believe is the proper way to move ahead, you still already have House Republicans saying we need more time. Even after 50 years of study on this, by the way, this report 10 months, but studies have been going on for 50 years.
The House has already made their decision on this. If this happens in the lame duck, it's already clear cleared the House, and so that's essentially just noise. But Secretary Gates today took that argument like a long, slow curveball right over the plate and said, you want to know what the risk is? You want to know what's irresponsible? To not act on this and take care of this on our own terms through a means that we have now studied and feel very comfortable with, one of the largest surveys ever in the military on any personnel issue. Let us do this in a responsible way. Otherwise, the courts are going to force us to, and that's the irresponsible thing to do. So I think that argument, at least in my opinion, fairly demolished. The question is really whether or not the Senate is going to get it together. I do think that senators like Scott Brown, both of the senators from Maine, other people do have quite a lot of cover from this report, as much cover as is possibly imaginable.
But on the other side, the opposition led by Senator John McCain, who just this morning again reiterated his stance. In fact, let me play what John McCain said just this morning regarding Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We're getting it right now, but it is quite a contrast to what we heard from the candidate who's running for President, John McCain, and the John McCain we're hearing from now. I think, do we have it? Nevertheless, Rachel, we know now that John McCain initially said if military leaders came to him and said, listen, the time has come, that he would, in a sense, go along with this. Here's what he said this morning.
This was a political promise made by an inexperienced president or candidate for presidency of the United States. Somehow allege that this policy has been damaging the military is simply false. So the fact is that this system is working.
My apologies, that was this Sunday, Rachel, but in 2006 he said, the day the leadership of the military comes to me and says, Senator, we ought to change the policy, then I think we ought to consider seriously changing it.
What's incredible, too, is that at that time in 2006, he specifically cited Colin Powell and said, I looked to Colin Powell and his opinion on this when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was implemented. I respected his view as a military leader that this is what we should do. Colin Powell, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at that time. Now, John McCain is saying that the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff doesn't qualify in his mind as a military leader. He said, in all due respect, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is not directly in charge of the troops. Essentially saying that Admiral Mullen's professional opinion on this as chairman of the Joint Chiefs doesn't count to John McCain because John McCain no longer agrees with him.
Secretary Gates referred to the president and the president's desires. What do you want to see from specifically the president next?
It's interesting that Secretary Gates specifically singled out the president and said, if we are seen to be slow rolling this, obviously military jargon for implementing it but not really, saying yes sir and then not really doing it. If we are seen to be slow rolling this, he's essentially saying, I expect the president to be all over us on this. That is an indication that the Pentagon is feeling like the president is directly engaged on this. There's been a lot of criticism from the left that the president's level of engagement on this has not been visible, has not been something that the left feels he's been as enthusiastic about as he says he is. This is a sign that the president's been doing a lot.
All right. Thank you, Rachel, for joining us. And,
Cameron,
of course, you can see more of what Rachel has to say about Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the events today. The Rachel Maddow Show, weeknights at 9 Eastern, only on MSNBC.